who doesn't love roller coasters? From amusement parks that were shut down by natural disasters to ones that were forced to close due to global pandemics and more, here's some abandoned theme parks. Number 10. The parks of today. In late 2019 and early 2020, an epidemic of global proportions occurred. It started out in China, then slowly made its way to Europe, then the United States, and virtually all nations in between. The virus was one that was apparently incredibly strong and seemed to spread through certain kinds of contact like coughing, sneezing, and germ transfer, which meant people gathering in rather large areas was not an acceptable thing to do. This meant that over the course of a few months, every major theme park, regardless of who owned them and what state or country they were in, was shut down. Now, these once adrenaline-pumped places of joy are still silent and abandoned. Though a few like Disney Shanghai have reopened, it's not the standard, and there are plenty of conditions that must be met for many to be reopened once again. If you were to somehow get into these parks, ninja style, it would no doubt be a creepy experience because there's no lights or sounds or any movement going on. You would see a very empty park full of all sorts of stuff that probably hasn't been cleaned in weeks. Kind of an I Am Legend vibe. While there's no doubt the parks will eventually reopen, it's hard to know exactly when that day will be. So until then, the vast majority will remain abandoned. Number 9. Chippewa Lake Park. This is a park with a bit of an interesting history, as it ran for 100 years, something many parks can't say, or even hope to say one day. After closing down in 1978, nature took its course. It's now flooded with trees, growing every which way, all over the place. Some of them are actually growing through the rides themselves that still remain in the park. Other rides have found themselves crushed under the weight of falling trees. But that's not all you'll find in this abandoned park. This park also had a performance stage, and someone tagged it with a graffiti quote that read, "The old fortune teller lies dead on the floor. Nobody needs fortunes told anymore." That line is from a song called Death of a Clown by the Kinks, if you didn't know. But why someone would put it on the stage is a question no one but the artist knows the answer to. Number 8. Gulliver's Kingdom. One of the beautiful things about amusement parks is that they can have their inspiration come from anywhere. Movies, comics, television, books. A great example of this is the Wizarding World of Harry Potter in Universal Studios in Florida. But while Harry Potter is a great example of bringing a book to life, not every park makes good choices on their influences, and they pay the price as a result. Case in point, in Japan, someone had the idea to try and make a theme park based on the classic literary story Gulliver's Travels. They based the entire park on the little world that Gulliver found himself in, and even had a massive statue of Gulliver tied to the ground like in the classic scene. However, people were not amused, and so the park closed down shortly after it was built. One of the biggest problems was that the park was in a terrible location, as its neighbors was Mount Fuji, the infamous suicide forest, and a doomsday cult. It's not hard to imagine how creepy the park must have been after it shut down. In 2007, someone thought it was too creepy and started to take it down. As of today, very little remains. Number 7. Wonderland Amusement Park. China and the US have always been competitive, and because of the success of Disneyland and Disney World, China decided to have their own massive amusement park that would try and put Disney to shame. And in fact, it was designed to be the biggest amusement park in all of Asia, which is no small feat. So, what happened? The park was about half built when it was besieged by a slew of problems. There were some money issues, investors started to drop out of the project, and then the people in the areas surrounding the half-built park rose up to protest its development. Among these were farmers who didn't want their crops to be so close to this massive park. Because of all of this, work on the park stopped, and it became a monument to how things can look when you don't finish what you start. Ironically, though, people did visit the park just to see how it looked. That is, until it was torn down in 2013. Most ironic of all is that China is now home to Disney's Shanghai Resort. Someone jumped on that Disney train. Number 6. River Country. Disney has done a lot to expand their amusement parks over the years, and eventually they decided to create their first water park. It was called River Country. And what was the theme? Hillbillies. People really enjoyed it, to the extent that it became a must-see destination for years. And considering it was built in 1976, that's quite an accomplishment. It even stayed around after Disney built bigger and better parks. People just loved River Country, until they didn't anymore. As such, by springtime 2002, River Country remained closed after some routine maintenance, and was never reopened. By 2005, they announced that it would be closed forever. The park soon became wild with vegetation, making it look like a shell of its former glory. Number 5. Joyland. Joyland was a park that was built in almost the literal middle of America, Wichita, Kansas. The park itself was built in 1949 and had much success, as well as looking the style of old-school amusement parks. However, as time went on, while other parks updated and upgraded their rides, Joyland did not. If you recall, old-school parks made wooden roller coasters, which were fine at the time, but as time goes on, they can be very dangerous, and they don't age well. Sadly, this lack of improvement costs them dearly. A young girl was riding the Ferris wheel when she slipped through the restraint bar and fell to the ground. She was a couple dozen feet up when she did it. Though she lived, it raised major concern for the park and the well-being of the customers. Eventually, the park closed in 2004, but it's still there to this day. Number 4. Lake Shawnee Amusement Park. Ever hear of a place being haunted because it was built on an ancient burial ground? Of course you have. Bad things start to go down, and that's exactly what happened at Lake Shawnee Amusement Park. What's worse about this, though, was that the land was actually the site of a brutal murder, a massacre even. According to records, it was a land dispute between two families that led to many deaths. This was later verified after rumors started to pop up after what was happening at the park itself. History wasn't remembered when the land was bought in the 1920s and Lake Shawnee Amusement Park was built. Claims of the grounds being haunted soon spread after the park was tied to many unusual and somewhat random deaths. The park opened and closed a few times over the years before finally shutting down for good. It was also discovered that the land was an ancient Native American burial ground too, with remains dating back before the European settlers arrived in the area. Someone really didn't do their homework on this land. Though the park is closed as an amusement site, it is occasionally opened for paranormal tours. Number 3. Disneyland. To be clear, this technically wasn't an amusement park, but it was amusing to some. A street artist named Banksy decided to create the amusement park that openly mocked Disney and its characters while also showing the world what it would be like if Disney World was a police state. To his credit, he did go all out on this. He recreated classic Disney characters and Disney World attractions, but did it in a very grim way, including seeing Cinderella being hung while photographers took pictures of her corpse, and guards wearing Mickey Mouse hats and not willing to help anyone. The images were graphic, but the intent was there, and people loved it. In fact, during its very short lifespan, tickets sold out every single day. How many parks can say that? So you might be wondering, what happened? Well, ironically, Disneyland was dismantled by Banksy himself after the park was nominated for an award. Oh, Banksy. Number 2. Pripyat Amusement Park. Many parks that have been shut down are very much victims of circumstance. It's not their fault they're abandoned. Things just happen, right? One example of this is the Pripyat Amusement Park. Pripyat itself was once a thriving city in the Soviet Union. At its peak, in 1986, the Ukrainian city had over 50,000 people living in it. Because of its great lands and happy people, the Soviet Union felt they deserved a reward, an amusement park. And one was built and was supposed to open on May 1st, 1986. But just a few days before, in the nearby Chernobyl nuclear plant, one of the reactors went into meltdown. This caused nuclear radiation to be spread for miles around, including to the Pripyat amusement park. Needless to say, no one went to the amusement park on its opening day, or for a very long time after it. The radiation from the meltdown lingered, and it actually infused itself with the metal of the park. Radiation can be extremely deadly. As such, it's labeled as a place for extreme tourism. What's worse, not only has nature claimed the park, there are packs of wild dogs living in it. So ask yourself, even if you could go there, would you? Some look at the park as the symbol of the Chernobyl disaster, and for good reason. Number 1. Six Flags New Orleans. Six Flags New Orleans is without doubt one of the creepiest abandoned amusement parks. And while you can visit it technically, you might regret doing so, as it's a terrible reminder of what happened to the city. The biggest and most obvious question here is, what happened to the park? Hurricane Katrina happened. This devastating hurricane nearly took the city off the map. A lot of it survived, but not exactly intact, and Six Flags New Orleans is a perfect example of that. The park was badly damaged by the winds and waters of the hurricane. Many rides were broken, the buildings that remained standing were waterlogged, and all of the electronics were shorted out. Add to that, a lot of people decided to decorate the park with graffiti and other markings, adding an even more surreal look. Those who go there now will swear that they hear unnatural noises within. Another question you might have is why the park still stands. Well, because it would take over $1 million to demolish it, and despite its poor state, the city is able to lease the land to certain companies for filming, and thus still make money off of it. Thanks for watching. What did you think of these abandoned theme parks? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!